Sorry about that. Is that not true Canadian style for me to come and apologize to you all for the delay? Do we need to reschedule or at least call the show Real Kyper at 12:30 Eastern show? No, we don't. No, Real Kyper at noon's fine. Blame Glenn Healy. I got a chance to catch up to him earlier today, and that's going to be a terrific interview, and you guys can really look forward to that. But it is jam-packed here. Of course, we're going to cover so much. We got a game 7. How many people are excited about that? Yes, Colorado has crawled their way back in. Of course, if you were waiting patiently, as I know you were staring at the board that leads to my show, and that is MacKinnon gunning for the number 1 in the world title. And yeah, it was only just a few weeks ago. Myself, Doug McLean, were asking the question, is he the second best player in the world? And 2 weeks later, that's a no-brainer. We know he's there at number 2. But does that look like a guy last night that is settling for just number 2? Or does this guy want to hold the title himself? And where's Connor McDavid at all of this? Well, maybe he's like you all in front of the computer watching the Real Kyper at noon show because he's not playing. He's not adding to any legacy. He's not adding to anything, but he's patiently waiting for his season to start. When? Who knows? But right now he's watching Nathan MacKinnon inch closer to people believing that he can be the best player in the world, that he has that type of talent that separates him from the rest of the league. We've seen it. We've seen it over 14 games. And now history will have him amongst the best in ever with his consecutive point streak. Second best now with the likes of Mark Messier and Bobby Orr. How cool is that? And now, another good week? The extension of getting past Dallas would put him as a guy that could be king of the hill. Only Brian Trotz at 18 games is better. And now MacKinnon has done that. And when you look at the comparison between him and Connor McDavid, they both separate themselves from everybody else because of their elite skating. The cutbacks on both of these guys, the quickness of their feet. But now you watch MacKinnon, and he is higher than McDavid, not in sheer speed, because we know McKinnon's got that extra, or McDavid has got that extra gear that we've never seen in the history of the game. But when it comes down to sheer power and strength, McDavid isn't even in MacKinnon's league. And I can only recall from my early days in my career when I watched a young stud named Eric Lindros. And I got a chance to skate with Eric even prior to Eric stepping foot in the National Hockey League. And to watch Eric Lindros' first 3 steps on the ice was incredible. We weren't mandated back then to wear the face shields. So it was like his first 3 steps were like watching a monster truck going through mud without spinning. It was about digging in and then just driving right through the ice. The chunks of ice that you would see flying out of Lindros' first 3 steps were something like you've never seen before. Lindros at 6'4", 6'5", at 22, 23, and teetering on 240, maybe, and at 6% body fat, 5% body fat. It's like watching Lawrence Taylor, who's arguably one of the best linebackers in the history of the NFL. How about how quick he was? That big. That's the same thing with Lindros. Now, MacKinnon does not have the sheer size that Lindros has, but you watch the explosion out of the ice on his first 3 steps, pretty similar. And what's your preference? You want it done with power and speed? MacKinnon. You want it gracefully? McDavid. But no question that these two guys are doing what, in my era, Gretzky and Lemieux did, and 15 years ago, what Crosby and Ovechkin have done. So some of you, if you decided that you like the power of MacKinnon over McDavid, I don't know how you could argue that MacKinnon isn't the best player in the world. And we'll watch him now take it to a game 7. And how about the Dallas Stars? Where are the Dallas Stars in all of this? You know, they did blow last year a 3-2 lead against St. Louis Blues. And now to come into the bubble and blow a 3-1 lead to Colorado. And yes, you are up against the best players in the world right now, especially when McDavid's home. But you're up against a goaltender that a lot of people think is a good American Hockey League goalie. It's even questionable whether Hutchinson is a bona fide backup in the NHL. But he did his job yesterday. I don't think he had to be spectacular like Demko was for the Vancouver Canucks, but he did his job. And Dallas did not do their job. And they look a lot like that team in the regular season where they couldn't score. They're not getting enough offensive zone time. And now you're questioning whether they're, dare I say it, choke. Are they choking right now, the Dallas Stars? And where are their elite players? And while we love Joe Pavelski and what he's been able to do so far for Dallas Stars, he can't be your go-to guy. Not at age 36 with the mileage that he's had. He cannot be that guy that you say, he's got to be the difference maker. He's a great support guy, and that's what Dallas brought him in, to support the likes of Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn. But Tyler Seguin is supposed to be the equivalent of Nathan MacKinnon for the Dallas Stars. And while we see historic numbers coming out of MacKinnon, we see 2 goals in 14 games for Tyler Seguin. He's got to be the difference maker in game 7. He has to show up. It's their time. And Dallas, you want to see some changes in the offseason? Just watch Dallas blow this thing and see what happens in that organization moving forward. All right, more on our jam-packed show. We also have Joe Holka coming on a little later. And we've talked a little bit about betting 101, but we're going to get into the over-under and what that means to you. And my understanding is in tonight's contest between Philly and the Islanders, Joe would be boosting up a little bit, putting odds in your favor. So you're going to want to stick around for that as well. Maybe touching a little bit on the trade as well between the Montreal Canadiens and the St. Louis Blues, where we watched Jake Allen. While some may still question Michael Hutchinson being a legitimate backup goalie, nobody questioned Jake Allen. Jake Allen had a great season. Jake Allen put himself in a position where teams were interested in him. But we're still scratching our heads a little bit on the Montreal Canadiens paying next season over $15 million for their goaltending. I mean, no one's ever come close to that. Yes, they have cap space, which means that there has to be some other reason. We know Caden Primo is a young and up-and-coming prospect where many believe will be the heir apparent to Carey Price. Now, had a few conversations with some people that are questioning where the motive is for Jake Allen to come in. And when it's all said and done, if you believe that you need a backup goalie for Carey that can play a legitimate 25, 30 games and get key points for the Montreal Canadiens, then you get that. But is there more to that? We've got an expansion draft coming up. Someone asked me, is there any possibility at all that with one more year on Jake Allen's contract, could the Montreal Canadiens be in a position to maybe not protect Carey Price and get rid of the last 5 years of a $10.5 million contract? Wow. And you start thinking about the circumstances and where we are in this world right now and when we may be starting up again and where the cap is now and how much you think the cap's going to go up in the next 3 or 4 years. and you look at Carey Price's age at 33, you got Shea Weber turning 36. You got Petry's looking for another contract at age, 32, 33. And you got some old guys. And Carey is an older guy on that team. And then you also got the other extreme of Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, and where's the fit in all of this? Could the Montreal Canadiens possibly leave Carey Price unprotected here? Would Seattle even consider taking that contract at 10.5? Now, if you've watched the success of Marc-Andre Fleury in 2 years for the Vegas Golden Knights, might not be that far-fetched. Seattle, how far is that from British Columbia? That's home to Carey Price. Does he look at that saying I can be closer to home out west? Would that be appealing for Carey Price, who might not see a Montreal Canadian team compete for a Stanley Cup in another 3 years? Legitimate. I would put Carey at 36, 37. I would have said a year ago that there was no chance at all. I don't believe for 1 second that that's in the plans now, but who knows this time next year when we are looking at the expansion draft. Anything's possible. We saw Marc-Andre Fleury, a tremendous soldier for the Pittsburgh Penguins over all those years, and he got somehow pushed to the side. Who knows in this crazy sports world? But we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, we've got Glenn Healy coming up here, and just a note that I will touch base on Mike Babcock. I went into the chat. Besides apologizing, I did give you a little bit of a nugget in terms of what's going on now with Mike Babcock and the Washington Capitals. We do know Todd Reardon just got named to the Pittsburgh Penguins with Mike Sullivan and Mike Vellucci. Those are those two new assistant coaches. And Todd Reardon, nice guy, but that's where his fit is as an assistant coach. And I think he knew that, and he jumped on a great opportunity to go work with Sidney Crosby, Malkin, and see if they can keep that team contending for another year or two, because we know that window's slowly closing as well. So I'll touch on Mike Babcock. We'll go to Joe a little later on. Thank you for your patience. Keep the comments coming. Subscribe. Hit the like button for me. That stuff goes a long way. And I give you now Glenn Healy. Now, Glenn Healy, a 15-year veteran of the National Hockey League. This guy's worn so many hats. I've had the pleasure of knowing Glenn Healy for a very long time. So you'll get the kind of the chemistry that we may have, the tongue-in-cheek comments, ripping on each other isn't anything new for us. You'll get a sense of that. But this guy's been through it all as a player, as a member of the NHL Players Association for a brief time, and now as the executive director of our NHL alumni. And we also get to talk a little bit about the human side of that transition between going from player to your second career, and how it's not always about how much money you have in the bank. I don't care if you made $1 million in your career or $50 million in your career. That's not what it's all about. It's about you. It's about the way you feel about yourself and the way you can feel like you can contribute still. And that has nothing to do with your bank account. And not all of us make that transition as smoothly as others. And it's a battle, and Glenn knows about it. We'll talk to Glenn as well on that and so much more. So sit back and enjoy Glenn Healy, Executive Director of the NHL Alumni. All right, Heels. I've known you, since I was 17. So how long before we throw this interview in the ditch?
It's already in the ditch. I think it happened all those years ago when you were 17, asking for my autograph every day. I just pushed you aside. But no, we go way back. We've gone through strikes and lockouts together, and training together to try to make the NHL. We actually had a game where you had 2 goals against me, and you were chirping me at the face-off, telling me that you were going to get a hat trick with 11 seconds left. And I said, if you did, I would quit. Of course you didn't. I didn't quit. And we won cups together. Families have grown up together. It's been a great ride.
I had you down and out for a hat trick, my only real legitimate shot at a hat trick. And I shot it, and I hit Joe Rickey's head.
Well, I mean, that was the key to playing with the Islanders. We had Joe Rickey in front of the net. So we were on to something before. I mean, they were talking about sumo wrestlers playing goal. We just needed Joe Rickey and his big melon. And then I went, from there, we had some other teams. In Toronto, we had Ty Domi. So I just replaced Ty was in front of the net. You get nothing by that either.
No.
So good times. No. But Kyper, the bottom line is, if you had got a hat trick against me, retirement would have been right there.
Think of the
Objects
money.
in the mirror are closer than they appear. I would have thought long and hard as we left the rink in Washington that day. But hey, yeah, I mean, you are a prolific goal scorer in junior.
Think about
incredible.
the money. Think about the money I made you by you not quitting. So I want to take you back right to the very beginning for a lot of our listeners and followers that we do have a history. And Heels, it really goes back to summer skates in Toronto. The late Jack Ridgway, who was very popular in the community, put together skates for pro players. And it was hard. I want to explain to all the listeners and followers, it was hard as a junior player to get in because you're skating with true NHLers. So it was a big thrill for me to start skating with the likes of half the Leafs first rounders in the NHL and prominent players at that time. And I got to be honest with you, Heels, a lot of those guys, from Boreas Salming on down, didn't give me a lot of time, didn't spend a lot of time with me, but you did. And I thought you were really cool because you had NHL equipment on.
Well, I wasn't an NHL player in that equipment. You're right. It was the Jack Ridgway Super Agent skate. And I remember the first skate that I went to. We had Rick Vive and Daryl Sittler. And I was first star at dodgeball. I couldn't stop anything. And I thought, I'm going to make the NHL. I don't think so. But the skates were at such a level because of the Hall of Famers, because of the great players from each of the teams. And really there was none of this organization or disorganization like they have now where, you're going to go skate every day with Gary Roberts and train and eat organic food and never have a single libation and just take all the fun out of your life. Sorry, Gary, but that's a fact. I can't even eat your food unless there's a porta potty right outside the locker room. But those skates were fun in the sense that's all we had. And we would get together and put together probably a better skate than training camp, because training camp had junior players and college players that didn't belong. Where this skate, you had to be an NHL player to get the invite. And Jack did that for many years, and many friendships built through those skates. And it prepared us to play in the NHL in our way, in our generation, the way we had to prepare to play in the NHL. And quite frankly, when we got to training camp, we were in a better sort than, if we had done it on our own. So training camps became easy because the skates were easy and the talent was less. And hey, I started with the LA Kings. We were yellow pants and the yellow helmet, and we could beat anybody up, but we couldn't win for the life of us. And our skates in the summer were legendary and fun. We went through lockouts together with those skates. Some of them started with us really, really preparing we're going to get right at this. Here we go. And then after about 30 minutes, we're like, screw it. Let's just go get some beer. This is just painful.
Yes.
Gary's locked us out for too long. One interesting story, Gord Downey from the Tragically Hip, he used to come up from Kingston, and he would drive his car overnight and wait, he's a goalie, get his goalie equipment on and wait for one of us to leave the ice so he could go on and skate in those skates. And it wasn't until
15 minutes, even 15, 20 minutes were good enough for him.
Yeah, it wasn't until years later that I actually knew who he was and said, wow, he's pretty talented. He's got it going. And so Gord would wait and he'd get on the ice and sleep in his car if he had to, just to skate in those skates. So it was great fun.
He loved it. He loved it. And yes, Heels, there were a few liquid lunches after that, and something that you would never find in the Gary Roberts program today. But unlike me, I had to go back to junior on a couple occasions, but you were in the American Hockey League in the farm.
Are you finished now in junior, or are you still back there?
Yeah, it does feel like it. But you were on the cusp of becoming an NHLer. And of course, the summer that Wayne Gretzky got traded from Edmonton to LA changed everything, and you got to watch it firsthand.
You know, I remember it was a Saturday morning, and I went to this little place in Pickering. It's called M&D Meats. And it was M&M Meats at the time. Same company, same family. And there's Bob McKenzie, right? And Bob comes up to me and says, "Are you going to the press conference?" And I said, "Robert, which press conference am I going to?" They're like, "You're getting Wayne Gretzky this week." And I looked at him like, and it was early in the morning. I thought, have you been drinking? Because we're getting Wayne Gretzky, one of the worst teams in the league, playing in the Smythe division, getting demolished in the playoffs. We just barely got in, but we weren't a very good team. And I'm thinking, so now here's a guy with 4 cups in 5 years, best player in the world by far, and we're going to get him. Good one, Bob. And sure enough, a couple days later, the LA Kings are calling a press conference, and there he is, Wayne Gretzky. I thought, okay, that is truly an insider. He had it all figured out. But that very first training camp was in Victoria, BC. And that's where the Kings used to train. We were at Wanda Fuca, and we were in Victoria in their main rink. And I sat beside Wayne that very first training camp. There were more reporters at our training camp than the Stanley Cup final the year before.
It's incredible.
And I know, I spent all the training camp, no, not stopping Wayne, no, not trying to make the team, telling reporters, would you get your shit off of my equipment? Because they're all standing on my equipment. And, you know, they're guys with cameras, and they're on my goal pads, and one guy's using my skate so he can get his camera up higher. I'm like, I'm on the team too, and you're wrecking my equipment. But they would ask him everything from, if you have kids, are they going to be Canadian or are they going to be American? And every answer they hung on to. But we went from a team which wasn't very good.
Nobody cared about.
To an incredible team that year. Our Meet the Kings night in Hollywood was just filled with stars, from Tom Candy, Ronald Reagan, Paul Anka sang at it, Neil Diamond was there. It was just the who's who of everybody. Tom Hanks, that wanted to be part of that hockey club and the movement that was happening in LA. And eventually, Wayne, thank you, the movement happened in Anaheim, and you think of all the San Jose and all the teams in the Southern Belt created by one player moving and creating a real dynasty there.
You traded for one of the Beatles, for God's sakes, in his prime. That's what it was like. And to give people kind of a comparable, well, we have great players in Crosby and McDavid. I don't even think those guys in another uniform would ever create that hype of Wayne Gretzky to LA. I could be wrong, but Heels, I don't think we'll ever see it matched.
Yeah, you know, when we went to that Meet the Kings night, I went that night with a couple guys you probably wouldn't recognize their names, but I went with Lyle Fair, and I went with Paul Gay and Paul Fenton, who was a general manager and a long time in this league, as an incredible skill developer. And we were driving in my car, which was a black Ford Escort with no air conditioning. Can you tell the salary I was making? And there were paparazzi out front of Meet the Kings. And they were taking pictures. You know, Neil Diamond got out, and all you heard was, you know, same thing that happens when you come in for your show every day, Kip. And we pull up in this black Ford Escort, and we get out, and you can hear and it stops. And I heard one of the reporters go, "Who the hell are those guys?" Like, we're on the team. That's why you're here. But it was such a change for us. One of the playoff games, our pregame speech was given by Sylvester Stallone.
No,
we were playing Calgary, and he came in the room. He wasn't supposed to be in the room, but he came in. Little short guy, you know. I think he's big, but he's not. And he was saying, you know, we're down to Calgary. And he says, you know, this is like Rocky, up against the ropes, getting hammered. You know, you don't have a chance. And look what happened with Rocky. Rocky got back into it, and he got back into the fight. And that's what you want to be. I don't want to be up like Calgary. I want to be down where you guys are because Rocky came back and he left the room, and I looked at Kelly Rudy and I said, I don't know. I'd rather be up. I don't know about you.
I'd rather not get the shit knocked out of me for 14 rounds.
So
I don't know about you.
Incredible journey, right? And that first year, Robbie Ftorek called me in the room and said, I have one bit of advice for you. You know what your role is here, right? And I was, starting goalie, backup goalie. What do you need me for? He goes, you better stop Wayne Gretzky in practice, because if you don't, you're out of here in a heartbeat. So my practices consist of trying on one person for sure every time, and anyone else could score when they wanted. Because as long as I stopped Wayne, I stayed.
You got invited to dinner at his place with Ken Baumgartner, and you couldn't even get in the door. How are you going to stop him in practice?
Yeah, it was kind of an embarrassing moment, but one of the guys, and I won't name him, but decided that he needed to have a pee before we got in, and the gates opened up. You know, we pushed the button. Hey, Wayne, it's the guys you really didn't want to invite, but you invited. So here we are. The gate opened up, and the gentleman who's on the team, not to be named, didn't quite finish, and then the gate shut. I had to call the number again and go, yeah, we didn't quite get in. Could you open up the gate again? And we made our way in, and yeah, I mean, it was incredible, right? Because here's a guy from Pickering, Ontario, living by 8 nuclear reactors. Like, this is a dream come true. And then we got a chance to play with him in New York. And the funniest was always this. And you know, Kip, we started every practice with all the guys who shoot left shooting right, and all the guys who shoot right shooting left, right? That's how we started practice.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's never tried to shoot the other way, go to a golf course and try to hit a ball the other way. Like, you look like you are either having a stroke or about to have a stroke, or you've had way too much to drink. And so we would have 300-400 people in Florida watching us practice, because we were the Beatles, right? You had Mark Messier and Brian Leach and Mike Richter and Nick Kypreos and, Wayne Gretzky. And out we come, and you'd see all the coaches with the notepads. Okay, let's watch their practice. And, you know, we would be shooting the other way, goalies the same way. And you could almost hear them in the crowd. These guys are in the NHL. That's Wayne Gretzky. And most of them didn't know he shoots left, not right. This is just an exercise of fun. But those are the fun things we had. But he came to New York and still, even at the end, was such a great player and such a great presence. And one stat that stands out, Kipper, is if Wayne went 16 more years, 16 more. So we got to see him for 16 more. And he never got a point in any of those 16 years. He still would register a point a game as an NHL player. Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
16 years. It feels like I went 8.5 years without a point. So that's half of what you're asking, Wayne. I can't believe you lasted that long in LA when you took a leak, or somebody on your team took a leak on the greatest player in the game front lawn. You know the signs, Heels, that say, don't pee on the lawn, just aren't for dogs. You know that?
No, that's not what my exodus was. It came down to this, okay? And I didn't find out about it till later on in my career, but we would go into Edmonton, right? And there's no charter flights, commercial, right? And so your flight the next morning after a game would be early. And so we lose to Edmonton, and we decide to go out. But before we're going out, Robbie Ftorek says, you 3 young players are going to go for what they did, eye training. Remember, that was really popular. I did it in New York.
And you start banging.
Oh, yeah, it's incredible. And so I said to Robbie, well, I'm not really happy about the game last night. I don't want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I really don't want to do eye training. He said, well, I didn't ask you for your vote. You're doing it. So I decided, okay, I'll do it. No problem. Stayed out rather late with the other guys we're doing it with, and I decided that morning not to put my contacts in and show up at this stupid eye test. So, of course, I can't see anything, right? And the results come back in. And there was a player in Edmonton whose family member was doing the test. And she said to one of the Oilers, you know what Healy's problem is? He's blind.
Is that important for a goalie?
It would be important. And so next thing you know, I'm with the New York Islanders, and then with the New York Rangers. We played a game in Calgary one night. And in front of my stall, you remember the Calgary, the rink, there's a long walk to the ice.
Yeah.
Come out of the dressing room, you take a left, and you come out of that, and then you take a right, and then you make your way under that
Stand.
the stanchion, and then you're in the arena. And I had these like arrows in front of my stall showing me how to get to the ice. And I thought, like, I've been in the league 12 years. I know how to get to the ice in Calgary. I know it's a long walk, but I know the way. And just before we're about to go out, Mark Messier goes, all right, Hills, have a good game. And just follow those arrows because we know you're blind. We were told you were blind. So just follow those arrows and they'll take you to the ice. And then the story was told that they thought that the LA Kings' problem was they had a goalie who couldn't see.
The Islanders didn't think you were blind because you had your best run as a starter with the Islanders, and who can forget 1993 when you dethroned Mario Lemieux in that great lineup from winning another Stanley Cup.
Yeah, you know what? That team, first off, they were rebuilding, so we had a bunch of young players. We had 4 young defensemen. We had Malakoff and Kasparidis, who came from Russia, and Dennis Vasky and Norton. We had some older guys and Tom Curvers. We had great leadership with Pat Flatley and Pierre Turgeon, and we had the Seagull, which was Ray Ferraro, because if he was in Skok and he was shitting. We just had an incredible group of guys, and Al Arbour was our leader. He was just an incredible man. When we beat Pittsburgh, before that series, we lost Turgeon against Washington because Dale Hunter decided it's okay to hit a guy 4.5 minutes after he scores the series-winning goal. And Al just sat in the middle of the room and started with Pat Flatley, and he called him Secretariat because Flats had no leg muscles. But Flats always believed that you didn't need leg muscles because Secretariat was really fast, and he wasn't, but he thought you didn't need them. And he asked me if you just tie a shift against Mario. That's all. And then he went to Ray, and he went down the line, and he was like, good, first period's over. Now we're tied. He goes, all we got to do is win one shift in Game 7 in overtime, and we win this series. And we got to overtime, Game 7, and we won one shift. And I thought, this guy is an absolute genius. Best coach ever, best coach I've ever had, like a second father to me. But he had a presence, and he knew how to win, and he was innovative in every way. But that team needed leadership. We had it. They needed a leader like Al Arbour. They needed youth. We were a fun group, and they remind me a lot of this Islander group now that's brash and bold and young.
Yeah.
And they don't even know where they are in the Stanley Cup. They just know that they really like each other, they get along, and they believe.
Feels like an Al Arbour team in 2020 where they're tying a lot of shifts and then they wait for their opportunity patiently and they counter, and they've won a lot of games due to it. So maybe it is a lot.
Great coach too,
Al
players
Arbour.
coach.
Yeah.
Like Al was a players coach. There was stuff that happened pre-cell phones that, if got out, wouldn't be pretty for us, for you, or for me, or for a lot of other guys. Maybe one day when we write our really tell-all book, not the fairy tale that you wrote, but when we write that book, there'll be some great stories, but it never got out. Yeah. Stuff happened, and it just went away.
By the way, my book is out in the fall, October 20th.
No.
Schuster chapters. You can get it. It's called Undrafted. A lot of Glenn Healy stories in it. And maybe we'll touch on a few here. But one note on the Islanders.
Hold on. I'm just going to call my lawyer right now.
No, don't do that. Yes. Don't do that. One note in the early 90s, and this was a real telltale that you were going to go on and have a great broadcasting career, was it the Heels and Flats show or the Flats and Heels show? Because I want to tell all my listeners out there and watchers, go Google Heels and Flats show, and you will piss yourself laughing, not just on Wayne Gretzky's front lawn, but where you are when you watch it, because it's so funny. I think one segment you guys started talking about the difference between the NFL and the CFL. Whose idea was that? And it was sheer brilliance, whoever came up with that, Heels.
Well, there was a gentleman who did all of our games in New York. His name is Kevin Meininger. He still does the games for MSG, and he would sit by us on the plane. And Kip, we were no different on the plane.
Yeah.
It was from the minute we sat down, it was nonstop abuse. And
yes.
It went the whole flight. And if someone was anywhere in our sights, it was abuse on them too, right? And so he's listening to Pat and I go back and forth, and he thought this would make for a good show. And so if you think about it, this was the first intermission of the Islanders broadcast, the Heels and Flat show. So that tells me there was no talent whatsoever in New York because we were it. And we even usurped the great Stan Fischler. Like, we beat him out for the starting role. You think about the first intermission for CBC for 30 years, it's Grapes. We were the first intermission hit. And I was getting more fan mail about the Heels and Flat show than about me playing. I was like, I'm on the team. Like, I'm playing. But yeah, the show was about, and I'm glad a lot of them haven't seen the light of day because,
they're going to dig them up, Heels. They're going to dig them up, and they're going to put them out there.
They're not pretty, but yeah, there was some
fun.
Pat got his home done. We did a This Old House, and the contractors were ripping him off, and he had no idea. And you're right, CFL versus NFL, whether Quebec should separate or not separate, the joy of living in Ontario and paving the prairie provinces so cars could park from Ontario there. It just utter stupidity. But we had a fun time doing it, and we were trying to draw fans.
We won the Stanley Cup in 1994, but it would have felt so much better and more if they created the Kyper and Heels show on MSG a year or two later, but they never went down that path.
No, well, you know what? They couldn't afford us because I had created such a big thing with my first time with, because we were like, Flats and I were like half of the Beatles, such a big show. We got paid so much for that too. How about nothing? We didn't get anything for it. And it's just as well. The Rangers, actually, they were a talented show, unlike the Islanders back in the day. And but that team was, you couldn't drive your car out without fans mobbing you. Like it was back to the renaissance of Islander days when they were a dynasty. It was that good a group. And then it went away for a long time because of real lack of leadership and lack of ownership. And now it's back. And I'm proud to say it's back because those teams we played with, whether it's Philly or Washington or, the Maple Leafs or the Rangers, or for me, the Rangers, Islanders, Kings, and Leafs, those are all teams I want to see do well.
Okay, so you spoke of Al Arbour and what he meant to you. I want you to tell all my listeners and followers the story. And Heels, this is the Real Kyper show, okay? That means, we're not cable. You don't have to kind of sugarcoat anything. I want you to tell the listeners and the followers, when Mike Keenan, the head coach, asked you the difference between him and Al Arbour, what did you say?
So I'll set the table first. And it was December 23rd. We played in Washington. We won 1-0. And we had all these bonuses for if you scored a power play goal, if you had a shutout, if you won so many games in a 5-game segment, you would hit the mother load of all kinds of cash, right? And we paid tax on that, by the way, for the IRS. We paid tax.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, but that game, 1-0, like this is hallelujah. This is great. Then it got to the day after Christmas, the 26th, we played New Jersey. And the reporters asked me, are you going to play that game? I mean, you had a great game in Washington, shutout. Are you going to play? I said, I don't know. Like, you think Mike's going to tell me? I mean, like, if it's Al Arbour, I'd know what Al would do.
Oh, my gosh.
But, I don't know what Mike will do. And the headline in the New York Post on the 26th, when I got to the rink, was, Keenan, no Al Arbour. So I'm riding the bike, and you were too. And Dick Todd comes in and says, yeah, Mike wants to see you. Okay, I know what this is about. So I walk into the room, and he says, he's got his feet up on the desk, as he normally did. He said, all right, Mr. Know-It-All, sit down. Now, I know it's not going well right from the start. That first sentence doesn't tell you we're going to be funny and friendly and fuzzy. What's the difference between me and Al Arbour? I was deflecting. I'm like, Al, I don't write the headlines. I didn't mean it. No. Keenan says, go ahead, Mr. Hockey. Gordy, you tell me the difference between me and Al Arbour. Well, you're taking it all wrong, Mike. No, Mr. Know-It-All. Mister, you know everything, right? So I figured, okay, I had enough of this shit. So I told him the difference between you and Al Arbour. How about like 6 Stanley Cups? That was it. Threw me out. Like there was objects coming at me. And then I played that night. We won 7-2 against the Devils. And I don't think I saw the ice for a month. I just hung out with you. So, and then, we went and we had the psychiatrist helped you and I, and we got back in the
Yes.
lineup eventually. But yeah, that whole year was.
Who was that psychiatrist? He had overtime.
Yeah. He had a nervous breakdown on the Stanley Cup final. How's that working for you?
It ended okay, though. It
did
for all
end
the
okay,
shit
though.
that we put up with, it kind of ended okay.
Well, Mike wanted to push everyone's button, and he certainly pushed ours. I mean, we would play chess on the plane and try to pretend
I got
we're smart.
that story. I got that story in the book.
And he would walk by, and he'd had a few libations and look at you and me like we weren't even on the team, like we were, I don't know, the stick boy and the bat boy, and just destroy the chessboard to the point I think we finished the year with, I don't know, 2 pawns, a queen, and about 18 pennies, 14 nickels. We had no pieces left. Couldn't find them on the charter.
I'm digging into the vents on the plane to get a piece out because Keenan knocked it over.
It's the rook. I know it's in here. Back away. Anyways, he was. We won, and that's all that matters. Yeah. And he pushed the right buttons, and so we'll give him full marks for that.
Heels, we also spent a lot of time in the hotel lobbies doing round tables. Me, you, Ed Olchuk, Mike Hartman, Phil Bork at the time too. We spent a lot of time, and we all figured out for sure. You and Edzo were going to end up being NHL analysts on national television, and I think you guys had me as selling souvlakis outside the then Sky Dome.
You know, we did have a lot of fun. Mike Hartman was the brunt of all of our abuse. You know, the worst, telling us that he thought the team was going to sign him to a long-term deal. When the only thing longer than his deal was the last time he actually had a shift. And we absolutely destroyed him for that. But we were such a close group, a really close group. And, you know, the broadcast thing, I mean, we never know whether it's going to work or it's not going to work. And when I was bought out by the Leafs, Hockey Night did call, and I remember my first broadcast. I did it with the great Don Whitman, and we were watching this ceremony in Edmonton. They have many of them, and my first game, no one's told me what I'm supposed to do or not do. There's no school to go to. It's not a book that's out. So the game's about to start, and Don Whitman pushes his mute button, and he goes, "Hey, stupid. Put your headset on. You think Canada can hear you by just speaking in the booth?"
Oh, gosh.
Okay, there's my start. And the first whistle back in the day, they used to put the lines up. Remember? They had all the lines and the defense pairings. And I said, all right, here's the, again, not knowing what to do. Here's the Edmonton Oilers. This is their lineup. And it was off. Okay, well, unless you were a speed reader, that was a waste of time. But don't you worry, Canada. The next whistle, we're going to waste more of your time because the next team lines are coming up. And my phone was like a Christmas tree with the exec producer. "You can't say that." I said, "Well, I did say it. So what do you want me to do now? Take it back?" And that was it. There was my illustrious start to a broadcast career. That was a lot of fun. The PA in between, which was great. Learned a lot. Helped a lot of players. And then back to between the benches. I know NBC thinks they invented that position.
That was yours.
Wrong.
You did.
It was us during the lockout with Mark Askin and John Shannon that were part of that, and thought it would be a good look, and it's now became a permanent broadcast location. So like you, Kip, it's good. It's great fun, but there are always other challenges that sometimes are more enjoyable.
You can never go back to cable again, Heels, because you can't exactly say what you feel all the time anymore.
I would agree. Like we are in a different world now than we have ever been in. And hey, there are times. There's no question. What we tried to be at Hockey Night, we had the ACE principle, which was be authentic, right, and be Canadian, and entertaining. Pretty simple. And so, you know, some of that stuff, entertaining, might mean, you may have to cross the line or get up to the line, but maybe not over it. Canadian, well, it's pretty easy to be Canadian. I mean, we love where we have come from, and authentic. And that's a lot of times it is what's missing for what brings us to broadcast, where we look at some of the people on the air and say, I like this person. He's authentic. I believe in what he says. He's not saying what corporate wants him to say, but he's saying what is important. Like I watched some of the other broadcasts south of the 48th, and I listened to them talk about the Stanley Cup run and how this will be the hardest cup to win. You could agree or disagree. Not one of them on the broadcast has won a cup. How do you know it's the hardest cup to win when you've never won one? It's like me saying, this World War will be a hard one. I never fought in one. How do I know? So sometimes it's just not authentic.
Well, and that's what we try to do here on the Real Kyper at Noon show. I'm Nick Kyprios. I'm joined by my good friend of over 35 years, Glenn Healy, who is now the executive director of the NHL Alumni. Keep the comments coming. Hit the like button for Glenn Healy because he is authentic, and you are hearing him firsthand on this show. As authentic as he's ever been on any program, and we appreciate your time, Glenn. But talk to me a little bit about the transition. You mentioned that brief stay with the NHL Players Association, and now you're entrenched with the alumni. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be, and first and foremost, as a member of that NHL alumni, thank you for everything that you've done. It just seems as good as Mark Napier in the past has been with his group. You've really taken it to another level.
Well, the role's pretty easy. First off, our mission statement is honor the past, which is what we should do. The guys that are playing tonight, there's somebody that paved the roads for them to drive on them. They should honor the past. That's what we do. I got an opportunity to play in front of big crowds in Toronto, not because they came to see you or me. They couldn't have cared less about you or me. In fact, they'd rather have seen someone else. But it was the guys in the 60s that won the Stanley Cups and built a passion where, your dad and my dad said, Nico, Glenn, these are the teams it's the Toronto Maple Leafs you're going to watch, right? And that's the team we followed. And that's why they had such a passionate fan base. And so for my job and my role is how do I make tomorrow better than today for any player? Every player retires, and there'll be 200 retire this summer just based on attrition and the fact the cap will be flat. And when those players come out, they'll retire. Will they transition well? And if they don't, I have to make tomorrow better than today for those players. And every day our staff, we work just strictly on that. And it could be anything from I want to move closer to my family where I have a chance to pass away close to loved ones. It could be I need a medical procedure. It could be I need some help with substance abuse. It could be I need to get a bathroom retrofitted because I'm in a wheelchair and suffering from Parkinson's. And so we do whatever we can to make tomorrow better for all of the cases. Never having a guy, pass away because he didn't get a medical and he couldn't get a medical, or because he had a medical issue and he couldn't get it addressed. And so it's a big job. There's 3,800 guys. We've got a really committed group of staff, and you never hear really anything about any player. And I love it that way because everything should happen with total anonymity. No one should know what's going on in anyone's world. And I'm proud of the work we do because tomorrow's better for a lot of guys than it was yesterday.
Confidentiality is huge, and you've respected it right from the get-go. And without dropping any names, Glenn, maybe you can just share a little bit with the viewers and the listeners on our challenges on that transition. Because, Glenn, we as an ex-player, I was never totally in the loop on understanding how many guys that we have struggling, Glenn, really struggling. And because you've addressed it so much over the last, year and a half, it's come to light on, it's not pretty out there. And people got to understand that our players, as glamorous it may seem, we have a lot of players in their twilight now, not in a great position, and it could come from anything from an underfunded pension to lack of opportunities. But can you share a little bit of that for the people listening?
So let's start with the emotional challenge for transition, and this is the one where probably every player that I've talked to, from the greatest of all time to players that have had marginal careers, to players that have played for 2 decades. The one thing they say is when that NHL train leaves the station for the first time and they're not on it, That is a very, very hard thing because what happens, the phone stops ringing and you're no longer an NHL player. And, what we love as an NHL player is there's so much structure in our day. Meeting at 9, practice at 10:30, meal at 11:30, have your nap, 4:30 snack, 5 o'clock meeting, just structure all over the place. So that emotional of having the best job you've ever had in your life and having the fans and crowds and friends cheering for you, when that comes to an end, that's a real emotional kick. And so that becomes a real challenge. And that happens to every single player. So, and what does that remind you of? Let me see. COVID-19, you feel isolated and you lack structure, where maybe you go a day without a shower. Or I looked at my suits the other day and I said to my wife, when you dress up, honey, we wear these. These are suits. Everybody's feeling that isolation, that lack of structure.
And trapped.
So that's what it's like as an NHL player to emotionally leave the game. Then there's the financial component, which is, you're right, the guys that played in the 70s and the 60s, their pension is, somewhere in the neighborhood of, and I hate to say it, but just less than $7,000 Canadian for some players. You can't even get a trip to Disney for that. They shut the border, thank goodness, because then you won't blow your pension on one trip to Disney. But it's not laughable, and we have to supplement their pensions. The NHL and the NHLPA, I'll give them a standing ovation and applaud them in this last CBA. They really, really have done a great job to make sure that we have taken care of the guys that paved the way for the current guys. So every current player I owe a debt of gratitude to. So the financial component is what it is. We just have to work through it. And then there's the physical component, which is this game beats you up. I'm 58. At 57, I had my hip replaced, and it wasn't from bagpiping, even though I love that. And it wasn't from playing chess with you, Kip, on the plane. From playing goal, quite simple. And, mostly everybody, as they get older and the game is beating them up, they have some physical issues they have to take care of. Most of our guys in the States don't have health care. Canadians, we have a universal one. It's different for every province. Healthcare would be a great thing to get for every player so that, when it comes to an acute intervention, when we have to take care of a player that's at the top of the triangle who really needs significant help, we do that really well. But the support staff underneath, that's what's most important. To never get a player to the top of the triangle, never get a player living on the street, never have a player with substance abuse. And so that support group, that's something over the past year and a half we built through social workers, mental wellness. So I think we're in a good space and we're in a good place with the NHL and a really good place with the NHLPA. I think for the first time in a number of years, we're all working together as one team, and I'm more proud of that than probably anything we accomplish day to day.
So how do we move forward, Heels? And I know the players make a lot more money today than we did, but guess what? More opportunities to blow more money. So how do we get out of this cycle a little bit? How do we educate the players that if they've made $5 or $10 million, that it's not about the money, it's about the way you feel about yourself moving forward with self-esteem, and so you don't get trapped into that depression or that self-worthless feel.
Yeah. So if every player's journey for all of us is one big triangle, the top's acute intervention. That's the thing you're talking about, that hopeless, helpless, where you don't have anywhere to turn. And I'm typically, the player doesn't call, it's the wife or a kid that calls and says, I want dad back, or I want my husband back. I don't know what's gone on. And it could be anything from a lack of functional integration. I mean, hockey's never had an out of bounds. It never will have an out of bounds. So we have players with concussion issues. And I'm not going to go down the road of CTE. I'm going to go down the road of they're not functionally integrated. And if they get really on the obtuse side, the world's not functionally integrated with them. Who wants to deal with them? The family runs the other way typically, and so we've got to clean up that. But the bottom of the triangle, that's the thing I was telling you about, the support group, the mental wellness group. If we can build up all that and social workers so that we invert the triangle, take care of everything a player has in their journey before they get to that point where I have to say, how did we get here with this player? Like, I know his kids. I was there when his kids were born. How did we get here with that player? And then if we can get to the point, and this happened early on when I took the job, I would have to say to some of the wives and kids, I'm sorry, I don't have anything for you. Well, I don't have to say sorry anymore. We have stuff for every player. So we're getting there. It's and the great thing about our journey, Kip, and all of teammates we play with, players now are becoming incredible teammates. If they hear about a player, if they think a player's lost his way and is in a stream without a paddle, they call us and say, you might want to look into this player. And so we have that ability now as one team, not Washington, Toronto. We're one team as a retired group. If players know that one of their brethren is in trouble, they call, and we have the Army released right away. And so I'm proud of that, and I think it's been a real team effort with all the groups involved. So right now we're in a good spot, and so we can be proud of that.
I had teammates, Heels, that wouldn't have known how to pay their own visa. They wouldn't have known how to book their own flight. It was ridiculous when they said, "Oh no, my agent does it," or somebody upstairs in the office does it for me. And we can't have that anymore. And to your point, I think we have empowered the players a lot more. They seem to be in better control. I hope that's the case, and I hope we can bring those numbers down in our association for
Kip, the average age of an NHL player today is 23 and a half. So when the player hits 24, he's closer to being one of you or me than he is a player that stays in the game. And with the cap being somewhat stagnant and the cap not growing, players retire much earlier. And so the one great thing about our association is that we're like cells that just continue to grow. We're going to get 200 more when it comes to the end of this season. And Sidney Crosby will eventually be a retired player, and so will Ovechkin, and they'll become part of our one team. And so the work that I do and you do to fertilize the ground, to pave the road, just makes it better for their transition. So when they step out, there's programs, there's solutions, there's answers, and it's never, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have any help for you. We have help. Money doesn't, when you don't have money, it's all you think about. And some guys will retire with lots of money. They'll never think about it. When you don't have health, that's all you think about. I don't have my health. And we lost one of our great ones in Dale Howardchuk. And I could just imagine, and had a chance to talk to him over the past little bit, and as he was going through his challenges, and that must have been so consuming for Ducky to have to deal with that every day, because he didn't have something that he wasn't in control of. And so, being able to provide some of the stuff that we need to provide guys to make sure that they get the help they need, that's the most important thing. Wayne will never need my help, nor will Mario, nor will Mats. There'll be a number of them, but they help in every way. Wayne has been probably one of the best teammates ever when it comes to helping you or me or the 3,800 guys. Mario has likewise followed suit. And I would say that pretty much every one of the NHL players has said one thing when we call them is, how can I help? That's what I get from every player, and that makes me most proud. They don't say, what's in it for me? What am I going to get? Am I going to get an appearance fee? They never ask for that. They just ask me how they can help, and they do help.
And they are giving back. They've given back to their respective communities, their country, in so much. But now they're giving back to every player they played with or played against. And that comes to the business side, Glenn. And, you've also been able to value the name and likeness of our NHL alumni. And of course, it's led by Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. And then it goes down a great list. And you've been able to see value in that like we haven't seen in the past. And unfortunately, that's the business side. To go and help somebody, we need more funds. We need to be in a position where we could stroke a check if we have to. And it's never been better since you. So I ask you, as a player, as someone that's gone through strikes and lockouts, how did that experience help you in terms of now valuing what we have as an association today?
So we have to, history's our teacher, and you have to go back to 92 when it was 3 games before the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Bob Goodnow was the head of our association for the players. And we were talking about having a strike over player likeness. Okay, so I can remember talking to my dad, fought in World War II from Scotland. And I said, Dad, we're probably going to have a strike over likeness. And he looked at me and he was like, okay, son, who the hell would want to look like you and even want to be like you? And I thought, well, Bob Goodnow tells me it's a pretty good thing, so we're going to look into it. And we played in Toronto that Saturday night, Islanders against the Leafs, 3 games to go. And on the Saturday in the afternoon, that was going to be the reveal of whether we were going to strike or not. And so I said to Bob that day at the PA office, I said, Bob, because I was the rep, I said, tell me, is it flashing green light for us to go out tonight? Is it green light? Like, what's the vote? Is it close? And he brought me into the back room, and there was an easel with a piece of paper, a big piece of paper, and the vote. And the vote was overwhelming. I think there was maybe a couple players that voted not to strike, and Bob insisted that they didn't know how to read, and that's why they voted the wrong way. So that was it. We had a strike, and it was all about likeness for hockey cards, having your name, number, and likeness for EA Sports games, whiskey bottles, Molson, putting you on what you own as you own yourself. And it was Mario and Wayne that said, we will not go back to play unless you give the players back their likeness. We should own that. And that was the start of us then becoming an association where we could make some money off of a video game, make some money off a hockey card set. Pre-92, the NHL could put anything on a hockey card set and the players didn't get anything. Now, that was 92. It led to incredible financial wealth for the players and strength. And then here it was 25 years later, I approached Wayne about let's do the same thing, but I'll put my Wayne Gretzky card up against Connor McDavid any day, and I think I win. Yeah. I'll put my Mario up against Malkin. I think I win.
And there's the true value right there.
And that led to literally a tsunami of players that said, it's time to make a difference, and it's time to change the way we do things.
You've made a huge difference for all of us. Thanks for doing this. This is a great insight, not only for what it means to me as an alumni, watching you now build something very special. It's great. The beauty of it, Heels, is every year we get a new member. It seems like Jerome McGinley's that just stepped out of the game a few short years ago now are big members of our alumni. I love watching guys retire and step right into our group, and it's a special group thanks to you and many people that work there.
No, it's nothing to do with me. It's the players. It's the players that make the difference. And if you're going to credit anybody, you credit the players. They're the ones that you could have 3,800 Glenn Healy's, Kyper, and that don't mean jack shit. You give me a couple of the big boys, and I can work some magic, and that's exactly how it's fit in.
We could entice linemovement.com here to start the Heels. No, I'm sorry, the Kyper and Heels show. I would never put you in front ever.
I'd have to have an interpreter to understand the words you come up with, because the one thing about you and your broadcast career, you come up with words that don't even exist.
Yes.
You combine 2 words,
correct,
and I can't come up with an answer off the top of my head. But doing shows here, I said, Kip, that's not even a word. I invented it, and so it is now a word.
For the record, at least I spell my first name N-I-C-K, not N-I-C-K-K, like you, Glenn, with 2 N's. Like, what is that? Who needs the extra N?
That's a Scottish way, I guess.
The Scottish way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Scottish way. So that means you've been drinking throughout this whole interview on me. That's the Scottish way too.
It's after 11, so it's
happy hour somewhere.
Happy hour somewhere. Not
Glenn
yet,
Healy.
Kyper, but I tell you, have a good long weekend, everybody.
Hey, thanks for doing this, pal. Really appreciate it. Great insight. Glenn Healy, everybody.
All right. Love you, Kyper. Keep up the great work.
Okay. Glenn, you got invited to the greatest player that ever lived in our generation as a hockey player, Wayne Gretzky, and you and your teammates decide to take a leak on his front lawn before you go in. Try doing that in the year 2020, and I guarantee you're in the back of a squad car before you zip your pants up. Glenn Healy, everybody. Thanks for doing that, Glenn, and some great insight. We do love joking around, but the work that Glenn has done along with others for the NHL alumni, has been truly remarkable. And that next generation will be well looked after. There's no question about that. Okay, some house cleaning that we can look at. And we did mention the Washington Capitals and their situation with their coach. We do know that Todd Reirden just got fired, like it seems like yesterday. And now he finds himself in a position to be the assistant coach in Pittsburgh. And one thing I can tell you about that transition, and if you look at over the course of, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years, how many coaches go from being an assistant coach to a head coach on the same team, and how many of them have great success? It's a tough transition. We're just talking about transitioning from a player to retirement with Glenn Healy. How about the one from being your assistant coach to the head coach? And Todd Reirden had a tough time. And I've seen it done before. I had Coley Campbell in New York, and Coley actually did fairly well. I think they went to a conference final one year, but he also had a very good lineup, much like Washington, with the likes of still Messier, Richter, Leach, and then Wayne Gretzky, of course, as Glenn talked about. And Todd Reirden was supposed to be that guy as well to take them to a conference final, but it's so hard. Just think about the relationship that you have with the players as an assistant coach and the fires that you have to put out individually with the players and the relationship that you have. It's tough to go from that to the head coach. So where the head coach has to be the hard ass, tell you like it is, you're not good enough. The assistant coach has to be that guy that is the buffer between them and form the relationship. And everybody said the same thing about, if it's Dave Lewis in Detroit, and if it's Rick Bowness, who's now the coach of Dallas and notoriously known as a great associate coach, or Todd Reirden, they're good guys. It's great guys. I'm glad it's him. I like him. Well, of course you liked him. He was an assistant coach. But to go and become the head coach now and change your role and your relationship with the player, less personal. That's what happens. More personal assistant coach, less as a head. And Todd Reirden couldn't do it. And I think he knew that. That's why we see him today, the assistant coach. Did he try to hang on and wait for other opportunities? No. He went back to his bread and butter, and that's why we see him in Pittsburgh. Okay, we do know that the Washington Capitals want an experienced guy, and we've heard the names. Peter Laviolette, Gerard Gallant, and Mike Babcock is out there. Now, we do know that they're still conducting some interviews. We believe that Gerard Gallant will go in there and speak to them. It's a lot tougher now under the circumstances with COVID to do face-to-face, so we assume that there's a phone call, a Zoom call, something going on. It doesn't seem like the Washington Capitals have made any hard decisions. But I will share something with you that I heard the other day that I find quite interesting. And just prior to the league getting shut down in March, I had heard that the Washington Capitals were well prepared to fire Todd Reirden at some point after January. I can also tell you that I heard that back then in the early year, that they had made contact with Mike Babcock, that they have spoken to Mike Babcock. And you assume if that was the case, then they had permission for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's a no-brainer. Hey, get rid of the contract. Leafs are all for that. So whether or not they were prepared back then to go to Mike Babcock, we may never know that. But we do know that would make Mike Babcock a guy that would be at the top of the Washington Capitals list. And is he still there? Is that the guy that they had in mind? I get the sense that they were prepared to maybe even do that as early as January, February, but then COVID came down and everything shut down. So maybe there wasn't any of the rush to go and get him back in a situation where you put him in a hub or a bubble. But we do know that there's interviews still going on. But do we get a sense now that Mike Babcock is a guy that is at the top of the Washington Capitals list? Absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right. As I promised, we also have Joe Holka. We're going to go into segment 3 of Betting 101. We're going to talk about over-unders and how it pertains to analytics. I just got off an interview with Glenn Healy, who doesn't use the word analytics. He uses idiots. So we'll have Joe Holka explain the over-under and how analytics play into that. I also just want to remind you as well, I'm giving away a Harley Davidson. All you need to do is open up a blitzbet.eu account and just put $1 bet on a game. That's it. And that gets you instant access and entry into the contest. You can go every day and put in a new entry, which would get your odds even better. And then after the Stanley Cup final is over, I get to give away a Harley Davidson, which makes me really cool. Really cool. Joe Holka is the co-founder and chief content officer of linemovement.com. Joe, this is your 3rd visit, pal, and I love it because you're also a hockey guy. I don't care what Doug McLean says. You are my hockey rock at linemovement.com. Welcome back.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, betting 103, I guess we can call it at this point. You're getting past the point of that initial betting conversation. So it's great, man. You probably don't even know this actually, but you went 6 for 8 last week on your boosts at blitzbet.eu. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
That's
That is
amazing.
awesome. Thanks for the update. And I'm going to offer another one with Islanders and Philadelphia. So I might as well roll with it.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit before the show, but we like the over today in that game. So what's really great, I don't think we've ever even actually described like what it is, right? So earlier today, the line was at minus 213 at over 4.5 goals. Now, after this boost that you've just done for everyone, it's actually at plus 100. So plus 100 for over 4.5 goals in this game, an elimination game. It's just crazy, man. I would be max entering this and calling all my friends.
Call your friends. Call your
Yeah,
cousins. Any Canadians that you know, do it.
Don't call Jordan. He already knows.
I'm in Colorado and I'm upset about it. They won't let me in. I tried. It's not working.
It's not working.
We're
working on that.
6 for 8, Kyper. Like I'm not kidding. Like
that's not bad.
That's something, man.
Does that put me up against some of the best out there? Am I a pro now?
Some of the best out there, just about 50%, right? A coin flip, right? So I'd say you're off to a good start for sure.
Okay, and what does it mean when they're attached to a money line?
Yeah, so over-unders in general, just to kind of back up, is just like the total amount of goals scored in a game by both teams rather than just who's going to win. So that what's cool about over-unders is they also attach a money line to that. So kind of what we were just talking about in terms of the boost. Obviously, if something is going to be an extreme favorite to hit the over, you can see something like we saw earlier today where it was like minus 200. And then other times we can see it end up being a little bit more of an underdog scenario of it going under, that sort of thing for two offensive teams. So say if we have like Toronto in a game earlier in the year and not many people are betting the under in a Toronto game, right? So that's probably going to be a situation where you get a little bit better odds unless it's a boost like today, and you'll just get some of the better odds anyway. So it's interesting stuff. 4.5 goals is really low for an over-under. So I do think that it's an interesting situation for sure. So instead of risking $213 in order to win 100, you can basically get pretty close to even money on something that's a pretty big favorite.
Is this why typically over-unders are your favorite bet?
I love prop bets and I love over-unders. And I think part of the reason I love over-unders, it allows us to get a little bit more in the weeds with some of the hockey data out there. I know that a lot of you guys aren't big hockey data guys, but I would consider myself on team analytics in some ways. I think Corsi is like the easiest one to talk about, right? A lot of people hear people referencing it constantly, but it's basically just the total shots on net for and against at even strength. So what's really nice, and I'll just kind of bring it back to real hockey, like in the NHL. What would you say, Kyper, varies more often? The way that your team is playing defense, like their defensive structure, their system, or would you say like offensive things like line changes, power play lines? Like what would you say changes more often between those two?
If we're talking to guys that have been in the league for 10, 20 years, I got to say, Joe, that it starts from the net on out, which means structure, defense. You can't think about anything ahead of you if you don't think about what's going on right in front of you in your own zone.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason that you see teams like they have their structure, right? The defensive teams are good defensive teams for most of the year, but there's a lot of things on the offensive side that can be a little bit more streaky, right? So in terms of using analytics, I like to use defensive metrics that are a little bit more longer term, like a couple months at a time, maybe the season. But from an offensive perspective, things can happen. Like there's power plays that are just clicking for whatever reason. There's teams that kind of find that perfect chemistry between their top six and they end up scoring more goals. So I like to look at things that are a little bit more short term from an offensive perspective, right? So
Hey,
maybe
Joe, I hate to cut you off, but I have a question for you. Could you explain why you like to do that and separate from defensive metrics versus offensive metrics?
yeah, so I mean, it's easy to say that, like, just for example, we'll use the Toronto example because it's easy, right? So it's easy to say that Toronto is a team that's going to score a ton of goals no matter what. But if they're facing a team, let's just use the Islanders because they're on the slate today. The Islanders are a very structured defensive team, so it lowers the expectation offensively for Toronto, of course. But that doesn't mean that Toronto can't score goals. So in a situation like that, I want to see how Toronto's been playing lately. If Toronto's a team that maybe had the narrative surrounding them is that they are scoring goals, but maybe over the last 10 games or so, they've really struggled on the power play and they're going into a situation where they're playing the New York Islanders, a very well structured team over the longer term. I'm going to be hammering that under, especially if a lot of the public still thinks that Toronto is going to be a team that scores a lot of goals every night.
Yeah,
Wow, you got
thanks
to
for that.
look at Game 7 now with a team like Dallas, and it just seemed like they struggled all season long to put the puck in the net, and yet they were one of the better teams, consistent teams, and they were getting offense from defense and uh, uh, defense from the offense, and everything seemed to be going well. And then the last two games, they have a tough time scoring. So that'll be an interesting to see how we boost that Game 7.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, the momentum in a playoff series, is better as well as anyone. Kipper, it can change very quickly. So, and then sometimes it's really easy. Puck just seems to find you in the right areas, and it just seems to go in. And there's other times where you're just really fighting it, right? And it's much harder to kind of put it in the back of the net. So I think that's kind of what Dallas is going through a little bit. We'll see if they figure it out. I mean, I'm just happy we got a Game 7. Kipper, it was looking like we might not for a little while.
Yeah. No, it's great, and that's what we want. We want to see these athletes take it to the limit here, and good on Colorado for finding a way. Good on Michael Hutchinson for finding a way to show everybody he can still play at the highest level here. So, Joe, really appreciate this. Just a quick note: you can follow Joe on Twitter at Joe Hulka, and we'll see you again soon. Okay, Joe, thanks for stopping by.
Sounds good, Kipper. I just want to remind everyone, too, that we do have our betting breakdowns every day on linemovement.com. Ian Cameron's been doing a lot of really great NHL breakdowns for us, so be sure and check those out on Line Movement.
Thanks, Joe.
Talk to you later, Kipper.
All right, that's Joe Holka from linemovement.com and a regular contributor here on the Real Kyper at Noon show. Okay, we got two on the slate tonight, Philly and the New York Islanders. It seems like the Flyers have got their legs going again. We'll see where the injury bug lies in terms of key players here. Sean Couturier and Barzal not being able to finish the last game. We'll see where that storyline goes. And as far as Vegas and Vancouver, I'll come out and say it right now. I am cheering for the Canucks. I want to see another Game 7. And what would be most interesting for me is the decision that that Peter DeBoer might have to make in net. Now, of course, all losses aren't equal, meaning that we'll have to see. We assume Leonard's in for Game 6, and we assume that it'll be a close game. And there's a chance Leonard may play really well and still lose. But then you got a big decision in 7 if that's the case. Do you go with a guy that has a proven track record in Marc-Andre Fleury, or do you go against the goalie that you like better but has never really done it before, never proven? There's always a first. You got to be put in that position to prove yourself, but if you're wrong, you got to wonder about hindsight being 2020 and the decision and all of that. Does it come into play, or is it just a footnote if Vegas can find a way to win one of 2 games? Losing 2 of 2 games changes a lot for Vegas. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. All right, so we touched on Babcock. We touched on the Washington Capitals situation. We've teed up a little bit of the games tonight. And thanks to Glenn Healy for joining us. We're almost at 2 Eastern here, folks. That's lengthy, but I know a lot of you have stuck around. A lot of our loyal followers. It's been terrific so far. We're glad that you're here for us on a daily basis. We love being here for you. And tomorrow we'll wrap everything up this week with the very talented Doug McLean, who's taking the RV out today. So make sure you're back in time because we will go 12 noon Eastern on Friday, live and in color. For all of us here at Real Kyper at noon, thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.